Hi guys, and welcome back to my Unreal Engine course. My name is Hussein Mashaykhi, and in this session we're going to learn about collisions. Now we are nearing the end of our video series, and one of the final things that we need to do is to create an executable file for our clients so that they can just move freely through our different parts of our project. And before we could make that file and create that file, we need to create some collisions. And basically we need those collisions so that when our client is moving throughout the scene, it would resemble a human walk through an apartment or a building. So they would not have this top view, or they would not be able to move through walls, or move through tables or other stuff that we define as collisions. So it's very important for us to create something like this, to create a camera speed and some collision areas, so that when the client is walking in our scene, it would be as if it's a human being walking in the scene. It would need to have the right height, the right camera speed, and what we're going to talk about in this session, which is collisions and collision areas. Now, before we start with the collisions, which is basically very easy to know once you know the basics of it, how to create collisions, I'm going to give you a list of things to do so that our executable file is ready. The first thing that we need to think of is basically the areas that we need collisions for example, the walls. Okay, we don't really need collisions for each single object like plants and stuff, but for walls or the floor we need collisions. Next thing is that we need to add our first person character with the right details and setting, and lastly we can just create our executable file. Alright, let's begin. Like I said, creating collision areas and creating collision for objects and walls is not that difficult to do, but we basically need to determine where we need collisions first, and then we basically go about doing it. So the first thing that comes to mind is basically the floor. So when the client is in the building, in the scene, they should not fall off through the floor, and so we need to create a collision area for the floor. And the first thing that I do is to go to this window and details panel, and then I start the process by first selecting the floor, and then I go to the static mesh of the floor and I double click on it. Okay, and I wait for it to be loaded. It's very easy. You're gonna see how easy it is. So I double click on this static mesh, and then when I'm at this window, I click on collision and select add a collision box. Okay, simplified collision, add box. Okay, so when I do this, it's basically a box that is gonna surround this floor. Now you may think this is a plane, but it's a box and we have some height here. Okay, this is the height of the box. So we save, and that's all we need to do. Now our floor has collision, and if we add a first person character, it's not gonna fall through the floor. All right, now we need to do the same process for the walls. We start with this one. I double click on the static mesh, go to collision, add box, simplified collision. Okay, and we can even move this box. Okay, we can just move it back and forth, and we can have different scales. So we save it, go to the next wall. This is very simple and straightforward as well. So we use the same method, add box, and that's all we need to do. And if you import FBX files, they already usually have collision. The next wall is kind of interesting because we have some space inside, so we can use the add box, but we need to move it back so that our character could go through this space and move through this space. Okay, we don't need to worry about the upper part because our character is not gonna jump, so we don't need to worry about that. All we need to worry about is the sides and the back wall. Okay, so all we need to do is to just scale this, move this collision box back, and even scale it down a little, and just place it at the back of the back wall. Okay, this is the right placement for this. Now we need to take care of the sides because our character could go through the sides. So I'm gonna create another collision box, change the scale, put it to the left, and place it where it needs to be, adjacent to this wall. I'm gonna make a copy with Alt on my keyboard and put another one for the right wall. Okay, so this is basically what all we needed to do. We save and go back. Now if we wanted to see what collision areas we have made so far, we can go to view mode and select player collision, and we get this beautiful map of all the collision areas that we have created so far. And I'm just realizing that we've made a mistake here. We have this collision wall here, but the middle part should be empty, and we need two separate collision boxes, and that's what I'm gonna do now. So I'm gonna add one here, and I'm gonna change the scale. Okay, so I make it smaller for the left wall, put it here, make a copy, and change the scale for the right wall as well. Okay, so we're gonna use these two collision boxes instead of the previous one. We're gonna hit save, and now it's fixed. Okay, so now our character can go through this space without any problems, and we don't have to worry about him jumping. Okay, so we go back to the lit view mode, go back to our scene, and next we need to take care of this wall. So I select the whole wall. Okay, double click on the static mesh. All right, so we need a collision box for this one. We don't need another one for the left wall or left wing because it already has one with the previous wall. So I only make one for this, and I save it. So this whole part or section is taken care of. We don't need to have separate collision boxes for TV and other stuff. Now this wall, I go to the static mesh, and with this one, a big unified collision box is gonna do it for us because the character is not supposed to go through the windows. So I use this. So basically we don't need to create a number of different collision boxes for each part of the wall. And next we have the cabinets. I select the cabinets, double click on the static mesh, and add box for this one as well. Very automatic, very fast. Go back, we have the kitchen counter. Okay, basically the same thing, double click on the static mesh. We do have other options available for collision. We have a sphere, we have auto convex collision, which is basically used for some complicated geometry and some complex objects. It has some setting, but basically it takes care of some nuances with our objects. For example, this little area inside, which should be emptied out, but we don't really need to concern with this. We can just remove this and add a simple box collision and save. Next we should take care of this table and the chairs. So I'm gonna ungroup this chair first because we only need to create one collision for one part of it. So I'm gonna ungroup it first, and I'm gonna make a collision box for this upper part. Okay, it's this cushion part. Double click on the static mesh, add box, and all I'm gonna do is to scale this box a little bit bigger to a bigger size so that it takes care of the whole area for me. So I'm gonna save. All right, now so if I want to show you how that collision looks right now, I can just go to the view mode, put it on player collision, and you can see that we scaled this collision to a bigger size, and it's going to take care of that area for us. Now we do the same thing with the other chair on the right. So add box for this one too. I'm going to make this collision box a little bit bigger as well, and basically the same thing. So this is a good size. Save, go back. Okay, so this area is taken care of. Now we need to take care of these two chairs on the other side. We don't really need to make these collision boxes even bigger, so I'm just gonna ungroup it first, and I'm gonna use add box for collision. Because our player is not gonna scoot down, we don't need to make these collision boxes bigger. So just this is gonna take care of that area for us. And the last chair as well, add box. And after this we only need to take care of this table here so that the player doesn't go through it. So we do add box for this one too, save and go back. All right, that side is done. We have these columns here. We're gonna use another collision type. We're gonna use the capsule, add capsule for this one. So basically it's a cylinder, and it's automatically encapsulate that column. We don't need to really do anything, select anything, we just save and do the same thing with this other one on the right. Okay, so use add capsule for the collision, save and go back. All right, now we have these sofas, these pieces of furniture, again box for these ones, and for the rest of the stuff that we have in the scene. Now the rest of the video is going to be the same thing, basically more of the same thing. It's going to be repetitive kinda. I'm gonna create collision boxes for most of the items here, so if you are kind of bored with that, you can just skip this part and move to the next part. And for example, for this small object, this is a small table, we don't need to add a collision box, but for the bigger one we should definitely do it. So I'm gonna do that one, and these parts, these furnitures, so we're gonna add collision boxes for these. And we don't want to overdo it. We don't want to add collision boxes for the small objects, because if we do so, our scene is gonna be a lot heavier in terms of load time and size, and we don't want that to happen. So we basically create the collision areas that we absolutely need to. Sometimes we need collision areas because we want to restrict the player, and it's regarding the blueprints and stuff, but I don't want to get into that. I have another course for that where we can achieve a lot of awesome stuff. We can just make menus, create autoruns for our clients, and basically that's outside the scope of this course, but I have a great course for that. So if you want to learn more about that, check that out. For the rest of this scene, I think we're pretty much done. We don't need to create a collision box for this object. This lamp here is too small. And let me just check out the corners and see if we have anything else to do. All right, we have this plant here. So what I'm going to do is to first ungroup it and only select the container. So I'm gonna ungroup it first, select the container, double click on the static mesh, add a collision box for it, and I can just make this box even bigger, give some height to it, save and go back. And that's pretty much all we needed to do in terms of collisions. All right, so before we move on, I want to take a look at the player collision view mode and have one last look at the collisions. It seems all right, so we go back. If we hit play, let's check, let's see what happens. We cannot see anything. We're actually outside the building, and we cannot move inside because we create collision areas for the walls. We didn't create one for the roof. We forgot that. We can create that as well. But the main problem is that we have something called player start. It's this capsule here. So you may have mistakenly deleted it, but even if you did, you can just click on this plus sign, go to all classes and search for player start actually, and you can just place it inside the building. And wherever you end up placing this capsule is basically where the client is gonna start from in your project. So when they click on play and they start your executable file and they want to start moving through your project, this is where they start from. So I suggest you pay attention to this. We have this capsule. This capsule has some dimensions. I'm gonna tell you how to change these dimensions in another session, but basically if the dimensions are not the right size, they cannot move through some areas. Now we are pretty much ready. We did not create a collision for the roof. We don't need to because the player is not gonna jump, and this is basically the view the player gets when they hit play. And when everything is ready, let's test out some of these collision areas that we made. I press F11 on my keyboard so that I have a bigger view, and now let's test out some of these areas. Okay, the column, the furniture, and we can just test it out from different angles. Okay, so it's working. Now we can go up so far because we have not added the first person character, and we'll get to that in another session. But the cabinets, the kitchen counter, the chairs, the table, everything seems to be working, and we don't have to worry about our character jumping or scooting down. So everything's working all right. But this area in the kitchen is important because if the capsule for our character is too big, they cannot move through this area in the kitchen. So we need to pay attention to this. All right, so this chair is kind of crooked in its placement, so I want to tilt it slightly so that it faces the table. And let me just quickly do that. So I'm gonna select this part and just tilt it slightly, put it back a little, and that's it. So everything is working. I'm gonna create a collision box for the roof as well. I double click on the static mesh after I selected the roof, and I add a box for it, save, and go back. Alright, we are pretty much done. We added all the collision areas that we needed to, as you just witnessed. It was very simple. So the basic types of collision shapes that we worked with was collision box, collision sphere, capsule, and also the auto convex collision that we talked about. So make sure to practice, make sure to create the collision boxes or collision areas that you need to. For example, I think I've pretty much made a collision box for everything that I needed to. We have this object here, and we can just use a collision box for this one as well. That's pretty much all that there was to this session. In the next one, we're going to talk about first person character, and I will see you there.